Hi, my name is Megan Smith. I'm an artist and a associate professor in new media at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan campus. And I work primarily in creative technologies, physical computing, and I really try to build stories out of syndicated data.
Hi, my name is Gao Yujie. I'm a PhD student in UBC's interdisciplinary program of digital art and humanities. My generative participatory performance work studies the materiality of duration and explores the elasticity of space and time in rule-based interactive environments.
So we are really pleased to present this project to you, and we're really honored to be part of this conference today. We have been working together for the last couple of years on this new project called All the Stars We Cannot See. We started it right before the pandemic hit, and we've been pushing through remotely, developing it as we go. And it's really been a really fantastic collaborative project. All the Stars You Cannot See is an immersive installation which geographically situates participants under a virtual sky. So when you gaze into this installation, you're looking at currently up to 25,500 active satellites flying overhead. So, one of the things that brought us to this project is the social media fever that is going on with so much communication transferring between people, so many images transferring between people, and we are constantly connected through our devices. But we wanted to ask some more pertinent questions. So, as artists and researchers, we started to ask, well, how is this technology affecting us? How is that fervor affecting us? How is that fervor experienced on a global level? Or maybe what could we build that could tap into that in some way? And when we did that, we started to look outward, up into the sky, and we started to wonder, well, we do know that a lot of the internet is in the ground. It runs through cables and it comes in very physical forms throughout our homes and our lives. But we also know that the satellites that are circumventing the globe play a really active part in relaying communication globally as well. And we start to wonder, well, how many satellites really are out there in the world? So it turns out that when we started this project, there were about 21,000 satellites orbiting Earth at any one time. And 24 months later, it's kind of almost approaching 26,000 satellites now orbiting Earth. So there's been a massive growth of technology or launched up into space over the last couple of years. And so we're really happy to be working on this project to start to visualize some of that content. So this project tackles some big topics. One is how to deliver an immersive experience to an audience with a physical presence of what space traffic is and how to build that space traffic into a rendered visual, and take it outside of the academic realm of using a paper to present your research, but to build it into something that has that generates emotion, that makes us feel interested and attracted to it, and maybe immersed in the experience. The second thing was we wanted to expose the extent of space traffic circumventing the globe. And the third was to enable people to have an informed opinion about the increased presence of space objects. And we want to do this. We're just starting to do that part of it, which is sharing with you today this project. And we want to push this project out, of course, across social media and some web apps, and just get the information out into the world. So this kind of brings us to, how did we do this? And of course, working in new media, we're always interested in each other's projects because there's technical challenges and we're pushing technology in new ways. We're relaying information in new ways. We're building stories out of tools that maybe don't exist anymore or don't exist yet. And so we have to build those to make new projects and to relay these stories. And I'm sure many of you feel that same way about the projects that you work on. We started looking into satellite traffic, and we started to find that, or we really looked at N2IO and Heavens Above. These two databases are on the web. They became really useful tools for us for understanding satellite traffic and for us to get to know what really was out there in terms of open syndicated data, trackable information, and data that we could work with. So what we did once we located a variety of satellites and access to them is we started pulling that data down and looking at it in different ways to visualize it and to try and understand it both quantitatively and qualitatively. To step back, many of us will know, but satellites really are quite interesting objects. The definition of a satellite is a space-based object that moves in an orbit. And in the case of this project, we're looking at those space-based objects that are orbiting the globe, the Earth. And we looked at visualizing those specific ones that are orbiting our Earth. These satellites follow an engineered path that are locked into orbit through Earth's gravitational pull. And the North American Aerospace Defense Command, so you will know that as NORAD, generates an identification number for each known human-made space object launched into orbit. So this made it easy for us to track them once we'd found a database that we could work with. So there are more than 43,000 objects that are assigned identification, of which 25,500 are actively being tracked. But there are many items that are no longer tracked or they are considered lost in space or defunct. And that is a really interesting topic in itself, and part of the reason that we started to draw more attention to this research and this project. There's a little bit of a background about the project. We really wanted to know how many satellites are out there. We figured that out. We also found a number of objects that were obsolete that are floating out there, but we really honed in on the active satellites that are circumventing Earth. This helped us to understand space and space-based objects. And then we had to, how can we thought, what do we do with all this data? How can we make something that is palpable? How can we take all that information and push it into a system that tells a story that is really interesting for us? So some of the things that we looked at were GIS information. So trying to understand geolocation and how geolocation affects the satellite pathway, and also what places around the world are possibly looked at more frequently. That was one of the questions we came up with. Or do we want to set one location? We were thinking about how we would display this work and if we would set a particular location that the satellites would then be visualized around. Or do we want to make interchangeable locations? We considered having different visualizations based on different geolocated spaces. We wondered about isolating satellites or looking at satellite patterns historically, whether there are patterns of multiple satellites being launched at particular times in particular years. We know that this has happened, but we want to look a little deeper at that. We also were considering looking at if there was a way to build an experience that tells a story of various spaces. So while a person is experiencing the installation itself. And is the story related to a physical location of the audience? Those are some of the questions. We developed many questions, And that kind of set us on a path of discovery in terms of trying to figure out really what we wanted to visualize and show with all of this information.
So our technical framework was done in Touch Designer, a node-based visual programming environment for real-time interactive multimedia content. As artists, we look at various categories of satellites that are running for different purposes, education, military, weather, or owned by different countries. Think about how to use varied pictorial elements to differentiate those characteristics. In Touch Designer, we built a linear process of parsing data, storage data, and 3D rendering for the outputs. We put real-time data through an online API that allows us to work with all the running satellites in real time. Once the real-time data flow into the program, we pull the satellite's footprint, latitude, longitude, and altitude that are formatted in decimal degrees, and we store those numeric data as RGB to a lossless image, where each pixel of the image stores specified position data for a satellite at a specific moment. We also built a database with the assistance of a new media artist, Aristotle Rufinus. And by working with the database, we are now able to drill down into the categories of our choice and to build very specific picture of what we want to look at closer. For instance, we can look at the rapid increase of Starlink satellites launched over the last 2 years, or we can look at specifics associated to a particular year where a space race was occurring across multiple countries. This categorical approach enables us to build stories from the past to the present. And we can use this data to predict through machine learning what the future sky will hold.
These are some slides of some early 2D visuals that we developed. One of the early drawings that we did in March 2021, we actually hit the button and decided to visualize all the active satellites. This was over 21,000 satellites visualized. We started to look at the data and we wanted to put it around the globe to get a sense of how many satellites and what the density actually really looked like. And then we started to look more at other things. And so we started to look at that data and see what we could discover in terms of patterns. So these are some images of what we were kind of curious about in terms of applying different styles, different paintbrushes to our data. So these are tracking satellites, but we've played with the way that we're rendering the images to see what we can discover creatively in terms of building up our installation. These were pretty eye-opening for us, and it was really rewarding to suddenly see this data visualized as it is on the right pathways that these satellites orbit within. So we started to build these drawings out to learn a little bit more about what we were looking at, but also to get a better sense of what we could do with this project. Sometimes when you have so much data, it's really hard to figure out, where you draw that story from and where you tease it out from. But this really helped us understand pathways and to get a better sense of what we were working with. So we developed a number of these stories working with Galileo satellites in particular, where we would pull over a 24-hour period, or sometimes over 6 weeks, we would pull the data down and then we would map it out to get a sense of what that movement looked like and how we could aesthetically play with it in a way that gives us goosebumps, you know, gives us something that to imagine more from. We're really excited by these first visuals, and they will eventually form part of a 2D exhibition at some point. When we mapped the satellites around the globe, that also really helped us figure out this project and how important it was. Here is the most exciting part of the presentation for us, because you are the first audience to see our new work in its immersive installation space. So these are visuals that we developed at the University of British Columbia on the Okanagan campus with the Visualization and Emerging Media Lab. The idea is that you will enter this space and you will be surrounded by this global positioning image and data, all of the satellites moving over you as in real time. We're really fortunate to be the first researchers and artists to work with this technology. And once we got to work on this screen, the project really took off for us. It's hard to explain how incredible it feels to be surrounded by satellite data. And I'm hoping that some of these visuals can convey it. We wish that we could have been showing you these in person.
I think we still remember when the first time we were here and then put our visuals on the huge screen. That moment, it's like the perception of the project is completely different, because it's just felt like everything is coming to you and you're just immersed in the environment to enjoy the moment of moving through with the satellites.
What you're seeing here is the data that we've been pulling and gathering rendered on a 30-foot rounded screen. So you can go into this space and sit in it and really take in the entire experience. You can navigate through it. You can play with this data. We are playing with this data, adding textures and different information. And we're plotting out these satellite paths in new ways. And we are really excited for people to come and experience this like we are doing right here. Overall, we feel that All of the Stars We Cannot See delivers a powerful message about global space traffic density, what kinds of satellites are circumventing Earth, and who is behind each piece of technology. This project does it through a creative means, and we hope that it will push our audience to ask questions about what is happening in space. Installed in the immersive VEMS environment, it gives us that wow factor that a starry night sky can provide. It's an all-encompassing feeling of awe, and it provides a new way to learn about satellites. We want it to be a pathway to touch outer space physically, so that we can begin to comprehend the impact of satellite density, potential surveillance, and the political and economical driving forces that are currently colonizing this new frontier. Thank you.